So, panel one, guys, is going to be indigeneity, sexuality, and decolonization with Oswin Latimer as our moderator, Danielle Guajajara, and Mandy Henningham joining us on Zoom, and Johnny J. And then after that, we have more performances.
How is everyone tonight? Is everyone enjoying? I really love the performance. That was great. Thank you. So, I'm first going to introduce myself. I am Osman Latimer. I am Crushing Colonialism's board treasurer, and I am a autistic adult. I also run a nonprofit doing autistic advocacy work. So I'm going to take some time, and we're going to go ahead and start out with everyone doing introductions. And Mandy, if you can start, and then we will go down the panel.
Great. Okay. So I'm Dr. Mandy Henningham. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a bisexual, non-binary, neurodivergent academic from the University of Sydney down in Australia. Here in Australia, we're made up of a lot of different Aboriginal countries, just over 250 of them. So everywhere is a little bit different. And I am born and raised in a place called Darug country, but my ancestors and my roots are in Butchulla country, which is in a different state. So that's me.
Thank you. And Johnny?
Well, I'm Johnny J, and I'm from the Ottomazura and Choctaw tribes out of Oklahoma. I'm currently living in Los Angeles, and I like to refer to myself as an nerdy indigiqueer. I am the founder of a media outlet, A Tribe Called Geek, as well as Red Pop News and Grim Native. A lot of the work that I do is in the media, mainly because I feel that the more that we see ourselves reflected in the media that we consume, the easier it is for us to imagine the possibilities that exist for us. And yeah, so most of the work that I do is centered around Native representation. I'm also working with a project called Walking in the Footsteps of Our Ancestors, where we are really working to bring forward the history and reconnect the Ottomazura people to our ancestral homelands in Nebraska. And through them, I host a podcast called Talking in the Footsteps of Our Ancestors, where we let people know about our work, which is, based in learning the history, but also in literally getting land back.
Thank you so much. Danielle?
Oi. Olá, boa noite. Boa noite, eu me chamo Daniela Guajajara, sou do Maranhão, da terra indígena Araribóia, Brasil, né? Eu sou formada pela Universidade Estadual da região Tocantina, no Maranhão, formada em Letras, Língua Portuguesa, e também faço parte da Articulação Nacional das Mulheres Indígenas Guerreiras da Ancestralidade, a AMIGA. E também sou coordenadora de comunicação do Instituto Chile de Yucunã Krenak, né? E eu sou comunicadora da Amiga, faço esse trabalho desde que a Amiga se consolidou, né? E recebeu esse nome, né? Então, é uma articulação de somente mulheres indígenas do Brasil que tem suas denominações, né? Nossas denominações são mulheres terra, mulheres semente, mulheres água e mulheres raízes, que são essas mulheres que transcendem, né? Além do Brasil, nós estamos em todos os espaços, então é muito importante a nossa presença enquanto mulheres indígenas estar nesses espaços de fala, né? Porque nós somos isso, né? Nós somos resistência e nós mulheres somos o útero do mundo. Obrigada.
Thank you so much. So I want to start out, when I came out, I guess 8 years ago, one of the things that I really realized was how much the way that my gender came out was not that different from how it would have back a few hundred years ago, right? And that the ways that it would have been celebrated were different. And so I want to know how everyone feels about like how your understanding of queer identity is rooted in your culture? Because I see so much about my own journey and I want to hear from others. So if Mandy can start out again.
Hmm. So there's so many ways in which it's connected. So here, when we look at various aspects of our culture, everything moves in cycles. So whether the plants, animals, everything's always going in cycles. So there's this sense of how nothing is static or isolated, and so gender and sexuality feel the same. Everything feels quite fluid, and in that sense, that's sort of how I can kind of connect to my queerness, sort of via my indigeneity and vice versa. So they're two kind of interwoven cycles, at least for my particular experience. We because we do have so many different Aboriginal countries in so-called Australia. Every one of them are quite different. There are a lot of shared principles and some beliefs and attitudes and things like that. But because they are all so different, it's sort of hard to talk about it all as a complete whole. We do have an area up north in the Tiwi Islands, and there we do have some documentation and about queer identities. And so up there are brother boys and sister girls, and that's the only real documented queerness that there has been in Indigenous countries here. And it's not necessarily that means that queerness didn't exist in other Aboriginal countries in Australia. It just means that it wasn't really documented as such. So, as is often the case with a lot of things that colonizers don't really like. So, because of that, and because Aboriginal people here, we don't really write things down. All of our communication, all of our storytelling is oral. It's through sharing stories. It's through dance. It's through art. And so, because nothing is written down, the only real colonial records are the ones written by the people who invaded here. So it has been quite washed out a lot of details. And so even though in the Tiwi Islands there's brother boys and sister girls, it doesn't mean that there weren't other varied sexualities and genders across Aboriginal Australia. And the whole kind of concept of queerness itself as a title is a Western colonized concept. So because of that, like, there's a very particular way in which it can be viewed. But in Aboriginal Australia, queerness and gender queerness and non-binary identities and expressions have always existed. They just haven't kind of been named. They've not really been othered. And so this is the case for us. It simply just is, simply was. And so it's something that's always been there. And it's a shared experience. I think that's happening or has happened in a lot of Indigenous cultures across the world. And we've been always having diverse sexualities and genders for hundreds and thousands of years. And so because of that, the way in which queer identity is then connected is that, simply by kind of persisting to exist in that way and be queer in a not just a Western way, but to be queer in a pre-colonial way, inherently, intrinsically, in a lot of different fluid ways is much more how my queer identity is related to my culture.
Thank you so much, Johnny. Again, the question is, how does your understanding of queer identity feel rooted in your culture?
Well, it's like Mandy said, it's always been. It's just an inherent way of being. Here in the U.S., a lot of our tribes had recognized several different genders, sometimes 4 to 8 different genders. Sexuality is also very diverse in many different communities. It's just inherently the way that it is. Um, and the reason, we don't know those histories is the same reason that we're seeing the pushback that we are now. We are very much in a time when queer identities are under attack, when our histories are being erased, when our very lives are threatened by the policies that are coming out of this administration. And it's for Natives, it's something that we've already experienced. None of this is new. And for hundreds of years, Native and Black folks have been telling people, we're the guinea pigs. What they do to us, they will eventually do to everyone else. And we are seeing that come into fruition now because nobody is safe. Whiteness is no longer a shield. And with queerness, it's so rooted in my culture because it is just an inherent way of being. We didn't always have different labels, but what did come hand in hand with those identities are very specific roles within our community as spiritual leaders, as healers. They came with responsibility as well. And, when you hear the terms Two-Spirit, not all queer Natives identify as Two-Spirit. Some do, some don't. And, and every tribe has their own language for it as well. And that's what we're trying to kind of reclaim as Indigenous queer people, is reclaiming that history just as we're reclaiming our identities as Indigenous people, because we are very much post-apocalyptic people, and we're in the aftermath of that. So we are at this junction where we're no longer just trying to survive what has happened to us. We're trying to figure out now who it is we're going to be from this point forward. And that includes questioning like who belongs, who doesn't belong, questioning our idea of identity, not just, our queerness, but who we are as Indigenous people. And a lot of that has to go back to remembering who we are, remembering what it was that our ancestors lived and died for, and what we need to be able to carry on. And a lot of that is rooted in that history. So when I think of my queer identity, I think of that. And it's very much just a way of being. It's natural. It's just, it's not something that was forced. And I wouldn't even say we were born this way. We just are. We're created, and for me, I grew up in a very, very old school Pentecostal family, a long line of reverends, including myself. And so I never really had the space to question my sexuality when I was younger. There was a path that you follow. You meet a guy, you get married, you have kids, you go on, live a wonderful life. And, for the most part, that's the way my life went until it didn't. I ended up divorced. And in that divorce and moving to a very new place where nobody knew me, where nobody had any idea of who I was, I had a blank slate. And I had the space for the first time in my life to really think about who it is that I was, aside from my family, aside from all the expectations that my family had for me, my community, just me. And in doing so, I met a lot of different people, and I started to find the language because I've always felt just a little bit out of step with everyone else. Like I didn't quite belong. I was a little bit different, but I never knew why. And I could never verbalize what I was feeling or know that it had anything to do with who I was as a person. So when I first discovered the language, I am asexual and I'm also pansexual. And a lot of people think that's very hypocritical, that it goes against the grain. And it really doesn't, because attraction doesn't always have to be sexual. Love isn't always rooted in sex. And for me, that's the way it is. I love deeply. I love hard. And, I fall in love with people. And regardless of gender, regardless of identity, there's just a spark that's in some people. And that's what attracts me and what I relate to. And it has nothing really for me, like it doesn't feel like it has anything to do with like just sexuality or even gender. It's just a natural way of being. And it's the way that plenty of people, especially Indigenous people, have existed for millennium. So for me, that's how I know that my identity is rooted in that culture, not just because I'm living it as an Otoe, Missouri and Choctaw woman, but because I know that my ancestors lived that too.
Thanks so much, Daniela. The question again is, how does your understanding of queer identity feel rooted in your culture?
Então, eu sempre gosto de falar que nós, mulheres indígenas, sofremos preconceito 2 vezes. Primeiro, por ser mulher, e segundo, por ser mulher indígena. E eu sou indígena por parte de mãe, minha mãe é indígena, mas meu pai é preto, né? E então tem essa mistura. E nós, enquanto mulheres indígenas, a gente sofre todo dia todos os tipos de preconceito. Toda semana recebemos notícia na nossa articulação que foi uma criança estuprada, que foi uma mulher indígena morta. Então, todos os dias acontece violência com nós, mulheres indígenas. E cada dia vem piorando. E a nossa preocupação é o que o Estado faz? O que o governo faz? Porque o nosso papel, enquanto mulheres indígenas, é divulgar essas informações, é denunciar para que pare, né, de matar nossos corpos territórios. Nós sempre falamos na nossa articulação que nós somos mulheres feitas de corpos território, porque o meu corpo é terra. Nós somos terra e nós precisamos de terra, de água limpa para viver. E cada dia que passa, o clima está mudando, está esquentando e frio. Então, tudo isso está afetando todos nós de uma maneira diferente, né? Não é só no Brasil, não é só aqui, é o mundo. O mundo está, como é que eu posso dizer, terrível, né? E nós na Amiga fazemos essas denúncias constantemente. E temos, né, uma coordenação de violência de gênero que já foi mapeado mais de 300 tipos de violência dentro só de um território. E isso é um número absurdo. É um número que não está em outros lugares. Não tá, nós também, mulheres indígenas, não estamos incluídas na Lei Maria da Penha. Então, nesse momento atual, nós estamos trabalhando, realizando a primeira Conferência Nacional das Mulheres Indígenas, que está acontecendo nesse momento, né? Essa eu não pude participar por estar aqui, mas nós estamos fazendo esse mapeamento de mulheres indígenas que sofrem violência, né? Abuso sexual, psicológico, seja qual for o tipo de abuso, né? E é muito importante denunciarmos isso e para que o Estado faça alguma coisa. E o nosso intuito com essa Conferência das Mulheres Indígenas é fazer uma lei de políticas públicas voltada somente para nós, mulheres indígenas. E além de nós, mulheres indígenas, sofremos todos esses preconceitos, como as manas já falaram, também tem muitos indígenas que não se conhecem, né, como bem vocês falaram, e também acontece ataque com eles. O que mais acontece são indígenas LGBTQIAP+, mortos. As trans mortas, eles não aceitam só por preconceito, então matam por matar. E eu acho que isso tem que ter um basta, né? E quanto mais a gente fala, parece que mais acontece. E nós, mulheres indígenas, estamos aí, né? Nessa luta constante. Então é bem difícil estar nesses espaços. É difícil nós, mulheres indígenas, termos esses espaços de fala. E nossa articulação é isso, nossa articulação acolhe essas mulheres, ouve essas mulheres desde o chão do território para o chão do mundo todo, como a gente sempre fala. E uma conquista nossa da bancada do COCA é termos a deputada Célia Chacriabá e a ministra de Estado Sônia Guajajara, né, que são duas mulheres que estão ali à frente e a presidenta da FUNAI, Joênio Wapichana. Então, é o mínimo de nós ali nesses espaços. E precisamos de mais, precisamos estar nas secretarias, nos congressos, nos congressos, em todos esses espaços de poder e tomada de decisão. Porque nós mulheres também podemos ser advogadas, médicas, enfermeiras, professoras, até porque, como eu já falei, nós mulheres somos o útero do mundo. Todo mundo está aqui porque foi gerado por uma mulher, né? Então, é preciso ter um olhar mais delicado para esse tipo de violência contra todas essas mulheres trans, né? Todas essas comunidades. E é isso. Eu, enquanto jovem mulher comunicadora, estou aqui levando a voz não só minha, mas de todas as mulheres indígenas do Brasil. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I was listening to, as I was listening to Johnny and Mandy, I was really thinking about how y'all talking about how we just are. And I think what you're talking about with us not being born this way, really, it's more about this is how we have become over time with the experiences that we've had. That's really how I tend to see it as well. It's not like it's any one thing that causes our queerness to shine through. It's a line of experiences over time that shape us, and that's how we end up getting that culture coming through on when we're looking at our queer identities, is recognizing how much it's embedded throughout our existence. I think that's incredible. So I wanted to turn a little bit and think about the ways that we consider our own indigenous queer identities and how you see it challenging colonial narratives. Mandy, if you can start.
Yeah, so the way in which I sort of think about my indigenous queer identity and how it challenges a lot of colonial narratives is that it goes beyond colonialism. So it's not just that it was there in pre-colonial times, but it's still here. It was here before, it's here now, and it will be here after. So therefore, like any kind of queer behavior or identities is something that has long existed, and so it's by simply just being, by existing, that's a great empowerment in itself to challenge a lot of colonial narratives. What can be quite difficult, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, is that it can be really hard to exist in a lot of spaces. So we do have some queerphobia in some Aboriginal communities here. However, that is something that was imposed by colonialism. It stems from the Catholic and other Christian missionaries that had come out here after settler colonials came. So some of those values have sort of held over, and then as a result, there can be some queerphobia in community. And then when you go into some queer spaces, then you experience some racism. So there's sort of a lot of spaces where you can't necessarily feel fully present. You feel like you have to kind of code switch or put away a part of you. But then there are some really incredible spaces that are designed specifically for Indigenous queer people like us. And they are so empowering and so nourishing, because you do get to just bring your whole self there and see everyone else doing the same. And there's a great power in doing that. So that's one way in which we can sort of challenge a lot of these colonial ideals that are in place, as well as also making sure that all of the other queer venues and queer spaces are decolonized. And so putting a lot of work in and making sure that that's a welcoming and supportive space. And that is something that has seen a lot of improvement, at least here in the last couple of years, which has been absolutely incredible to see. So that's been really, really wonderful. And the other thing is that by not just having these spaces for Indigenous queer people, but by also decolonizing a lot of spaces, and also then going into some Aboriginal communities and working with elders and other community members to make sure that they are supportive of the queer people that are already there, especially all the young people that are moving up into all these new spaces. It's really important to support and mentor each other and hold space for others. And by doing that, and by looking after each other and drawing on our cultural strengths in the ways in which we can do that, that in itself is very empowering and challenges the status quo of the colonial narrative that we all kind of have to are subjected to across numerous spaces. So finding joy in our multiplicity of identities is the best way in which we can fight a lot of these narratives.
Thanks so much. I definitely hear what you're saying and think it's pretty accurate to the way I see this, as see my own identity come through, is very much just by allowing it, you get to deconstruct colonial narratives. I think one of the things I think about most with it is just how we are, once we become unashamed, how it can be really easy to see that this was forced upon us, or the narratives were forced upon us, and how it took shape and how it was used to disenfranchise us. And specifically disenfranchise a lot of trans people back in the day. I really feel like, but Indigenous queer people altogether. Anyways, Johnny, if you would also be willing to answer, when you consider your Indigenous queer identity, how do you see it challenging colonial narratives?
I find just the easiest way to challenge colonial narratives is just to exist. For me, every Indigenous person, regardless of their identity, their sexuality, is a victory against colonialism. And there is nothing that colonial powers hate more than to see us happy, to see us having joy and achieving what we set out to do, regardless of all the obstacles they put in our way. And we see a lot of that pushback right now. We're all considered DEI and woke. But why? Because they told us that in order to be successful, in order to achieve, that we had to be exceptional. And we rose to that challenge. And Black and Indigenous people have gained the education. They went into law, they went into medicine, and they've made a lot of progress that way against these colonial narratives that said, no, you can't do this. No, you shouldn't do that. And yet here we are. Even just all of us today, we're still here. And especially as queer people, as Indigenous people, like, we have survived like the maximum effort of the US up until this point, and we're still here. And we still have a lot of joy. We still have a lot of creative energy, and we're still moving forward. And we're doing that even louder than our ancestors did, even more unapologetically, because now we know we're stronger, and we're not afraid to show that. And I think about challenging like colonial narratives. It's like I said, every person is living proof of victory against those narratives. And the reason that I do a lot of the work that I do is because I want people to see that we have learned to survive and thrive in conditions that other people couldn't. Um, it would break other people. And yet here we are creating miracles from little to nothing every single day. And for me, that's how we challenge those colonial narratives. We just keep moving forward, and we have to just keep getting braver and not being afraid to resist, not being afraid to stand up for each other, not being afraid to fight for one another. And that's what I want to see more of, because it's so easy for us to see all of these policies coming about and thinking, okay, well, this one affects this group of people, but it doesn't affect me yet. But it will. And we're starting to see that more and more people are being impacted by these policies, regardless of whether or not they think it will. Elderly people, disabled people, queer people, you name it. Every single person is impacted by the policies that are coming out of Washington right now. And we're all in the crosshairs. And that's kind of the funny thing, too, is that we have an opportunity that we are missing out on. And it's a responsibility that every generation prior to us has also had. And that is the responsibility to do and be better for and by each other. And not for us, but for the next generations and the generations after them. Because, for us as Indigenous people, we kind of grow up thinking about the 7 generations ahead of us. And that is the mindset that we have in almost everything that we do, in the work that we do. How is it not going to just affect me or my community now, but what about those generations to come? And that is the responsibility that I feel we have as human beings, is just to do and be better for and by each other, but also just to be brave enough to fight against, all of these policies. Because for us in Indian country, we have a saying that when one person rises, we all rise. And we got to remember that, because, now it's kind of, we're so inundated with gloom and doom. And, we need that joy. We need that celebration of our victories and our success and all of the joy that we still find in the world, that we are still creating now, even when times seem dark. And that is how I feel that we best fight these colonial narratives.
Thanks so much, Johnny. It's incredible. It's incredibly moving. I'm having a hard time with words because of it. Sorry. So if we can, please, Daniela, also you, when you consider your indigenous queer identity, how do you see it challenging colonial narratives?
Então, como a Agatha falou, né? Nós sofremos desafios todos os dias, né? Todos os dias, quando acordamos, já é um desafio estar vivo, né? Se para nós já é difícil, porque eu não moro mais no meu território, já é difícil viver na cidade, imagina para quem também está lá dentro do território, né? Porque sempre tem os invasores, tem os madeireiros que estão ali para destruir a qualquer custo. Não pensam. E como a Parenta falou, se o ser humano não se sensibiliza, quem vai se sensibilizar? Nós temos que ser por nós, igual nós somos pelos outros. Se ainda existe mundo, é porque nós, povos indígenas, estamos lutando para preservar o resto que ainda sobra de biodiversidade. Porque nós somos biomas. Nós somos povos de 6 biomas diferentes, né? E seguimos resistindo todos os dias. E, para mim, importante e um símbolo de resistência é eu ver 2 mulheres indígenas dentro do Congresso Nacional, uma no Congresso Nacional e a outra ministra de Estado, estando ali representando mais de 300 povos. E é difícil. É uma batalha muito difícil. E é pouco. É pouco, mas já é uma vitória. E para nós, se tem uma vitória, elas não estão ali só por elas. elas estão ali por todos os povos indígenas, representando. E agora também, além do Congresso Nacional, para mais além, temos vereadoras indígenas dentro dos territórios e sofrem todos os dias pelo colonialismo. Todos os dias elas sofrem. E agora, recente, está acontecendo de uma mulher indígena ser expulsa do próprio território por ser mulher e por ter ganhado para vereadora. Isso é um absurdo, você ter que sair do seu território, do seu próprio território, pelo fato de simplesmente um homem não aceitar que você ganhou. E é muito triste isso. Você ser mulher, conquistar por mérito um espaço, porque se eu sou mulher, eu posso estar em todos os espaços. Eu posso estar e com muita dificuldade, porque não é fácil você concorrer a um pleito eleitoral, não é fácil. Então, se você está ali é porque foi mérito. E você chegar a desistir por causa de um machismo, é triste. É triste, é um motivo de revolta. É um motivo de revolta. E quanto mais a gente vai atrás para melhorar, às vezes faz piorar. Aí agora, o que aconteceu recentemente foi que tocaram fogo na casa dela, no próprio lar, e isso dói. Isso dói muito para nós, mulheres indígenas. Não só nós mulheres, mas todos os povos indígenas. E ainda mais ela tem 2 filhos pequenos. Imagina você chegar na sua casa está queimada. Só por machismo. Só por não querer ver você ali naquele lugar. É muito triste. Então, todo dia a gente vem lutando contra isso. Todo dia. Mas a luta não para. A luta é contínua. E nós, na mídia também, estamos prestes a lançar um filme, agora em 2026, que é direcionado por uma cineasta indígena, Shirley Krenak, que vai trazer todas essas violências dos 6 biomas brasileiros. E nós vamos mostrar isso. Com medo ou sem medo, a gente tem que mostrar para o mundo o que está acontecendo. A realidade, não adianta mais a gente se esconder atrás de uma coisa que todo mundo está vendo. Quem que não está vendo o que está acontecendo no mundo? Todo mundo está vendo. E agora foi aprovado um PL da devastação, que dá licença para destruir. Até onde chegaremos? E eu penso nas futuras gerações, se para nós já está difícil, e as próximas gerações? Ainda vai existir um planeta? Ainda vai ter água limpa? Porque lá onde eu moro não tem. Eu sou do Maranhão, mas atualmente estou morando em Minas. Lá o rio foi totalmente destruído por uma mineradora. Então lá não tem rio. Então o mundo já está quente, sem o rio. Ali próximo, que era um rio muito sagrado para o povo Krenak do estado de Minas Gerais. Mas não tem. E outros territórios também estão sofrendo com isso. Com seca, com enchente. E eu acho que nós continuaremos resistindo e lutando pela existência e resistência. Porque enquanto existir um indígena vivo, vai existir solução e... Ai, desculpa. É muito emocionante como vocês falaram aqui, tá? Esse espaço. Então, é isso. Enquanto existir um, continuaremos lutando. Muito obrigada.
Thank you all for attending this panel. We're going to go on and see, or we're going to have some performers come on now. And so thank you all for your time.